supplementary then, Your Worship, can I just ask, is that the piece of paper that is attached? So it's attachment 19164/1. Is that what the Chief Executive is referring to as the summary, or is there another summary?
No, through Your Worship, there is another summary, but you received that in December last year at the last meeting.
Is that on the website then, if it's going to be made public? Because people, civil defence is really important to our community. And, we're making some recommendations. The Mayor has drawn to our attention that there were 40 recommendations structured into short-term, urgent, medium-term and long-term actions. And I think everybody really wants to know, and if I have got it at home, but in the hurly-burly of everything else we've done in the last 2 days in here, I didn't bring it today, but if you read last night's paper on the farming page, Federated Farmers had some comment to make about any final review of our responses last night, and I have got the paper to bring to the CE, but I didn't bring it today. But in the farming pages of last night's Herald, well done, was reported within 24 hours by Mr. Robertson. That's worth looking at. So what I'm really saying is civil defence is really important to our community. The public are really interested in what we're going to do differently. And we have selected a certain number of recommendations that Chief Executive's flagged she's going to pick up. So what I asked was, is the summary of the recommendations on our website?
Just check. Okay, we'll come back
Nobody
to you.
knows.
Check. Well, presumably that if it's been on to this agenda, then they would be made available, but we will need to go back and check 5 months ago if we did make
this paper will be, hopefully. Anyway,
and Councillor Singh was quite right, because civil defence is about everyone together. Everyone has a role to play, and the more informed they are and the more clear their roles and responsibilities are, the more effective we are going to be.
And it is quite true. I mean, that supplementary question is a valid question. Federated Farmers would like to know when the review, not just the review of the event, the review of the response is the issue that is raised, when that's going to occur, and when feedback's going to be given to participating groups.
So is that the McDem? So we just need to be clear that there were 2 reviews that happened. So there was our arrangement as a group and a KEG, and then there's the actual response, which was facilitated, and there was some information feedback, as I understand, to Federated Farmers may have been part of that as well.
I'll leave it with you.
Yeah, please.
Have you got a little slideshow or something, have you? Or is it that, because we've read the paper, right? And I understand from the members, are there any questions from the paper? Or any points of clarification that you need?
Your Worship, given that there was some questions raised around the availability of the agenda, I'm assuming that not all committee members have read it. So I would like Yvette to step through the attachment.
We've got up to 2:30. We've got to burn some time. Okay, Yvette, haramai ki koniki. Come over here and share with us key components that of keen interest to our membership. Yeah, sure. Well, you stay there. It's quite in the middle there. It's great. Or come over this side so you don't crowd Kate out. Right. Up to you.
So the review was done in 2018. It did, as Councillor Seymour suggested, it had 40 recommendations, actually over 40 recommendations that was structured into short, medium and longer term priorities. The focus of this report was on the short term stuff, the things that actually we need to get right now, because we have, for whatever reason, might have a legal liability or be in real strife if there is another emergency. So those key things really were around clarifying the roles and responsibilities for civil defence emergency management, particularly around the role of the CDM group. What are your accountabilities as a group? What are your liabilities as a group? And the other key area really was around the group controller and the exercise of their powers, and the group recovery managers and the exercise of their powers, and how this all fits together. And another thing I would add as well, since this is, these are really key areas as well as how we interact with McDem, and how the CDM director at a national level has what powers they have to instruct and direct us as a council and you as a CDM group. Clarifying and sorting out our reporting lines aligned with those responsibilities and liabilities, and ensuring that that CDM is the responsibility of all of the people working in council. And there are some things in the Act that talk about not just during when there is an emergency and when we are responding to it, but also beforehand, that we plan for CDM well, which is one of the responsibilities of the council proper rather than the CDM group. So thinking about it in terms of our annual plan, long-term plan resourcing. Developing relationships as well. So that is making sure we can have as many fabulous documents as we like and plans as we like, but actually making sure that the relationships within council and between council and other parties are working really well. And there's a bit of a lack of, it was identified that there was a real lack of a strategic planning framework. There were a lot of group plans, a lot of plans for specific and isolated matters, such as there's a Te Karaka flood recovery plan, and there is a plan for this and a plan for that. But actually our group plan needs some beefing up, which is the overarching plan that you make for the arrangements for CDM, and also the need for a strategic document that sits over the top of that links to our spatial plan and our vision and values as a council, to really set the scene for what the key emergency issues might be. So that is in a nutshell what those, the key issue I suppose really is that there is, we haven't planned for this additional funding, and actually the cost of training for group controllers has increased in the last 6 to 8 months, I think it was 6 months ago. So we are, what this report is saying is that we will try and source that funding from within existing budget lines.
What are the benefits of the training?
So the,
It's
so
a
the
legal
training,
requirement.
Yeah, but what are the benefits of it other than the legal requirements?
so the training means everyone understands the roles and responsibilities and who does what and who has the powers to do what is actually very convoluted and complex. And it differs between when you're in what we call peacetime compared to when you're actually in a state of emergency, and then another period immediately after the state of emergency, which is called a transition period. And every person who acts under CDM has different functions and different powers depending what time it is. And so an understanding of that is really important, because there are obviously liabilities. So for instance, decisions that are made, the CDM group is liable for and can have compensation sought against it for some things that might happen during an emergency that are as the result of our decisions.
Any examples?
So, okay, I gave an example to someone the other day, which was, so it was, let's say a flood comes through Te Karaka and wipes out a farmer's house. Now, that flood is not something that we can that we would be liable for compensation for. But if a flood happened at that farmer's neighbouring house and CDM ordered a helicopter to come and land to do something, and the helicopter smashed into that person's house, that would kind of be an example of when they might want to seek compensation from the decisions that were made.
Right.
So there's a distinction there. Andrew will be able to clarify that. Is that, he's laughing at my funny little example. You know. So your training is very important for you to understand.
How well trained are
How well trained are,
our rural coordinators and managers?
it was identified that there has been a lack of training in the last few years. And so that was a gap. That's not necessarily something that we have said in this paper to focus on right now, because actually the group controller is an emergency, in a state of response, in local emergency. The group controller is the one who directs traffic, so to speak. They direct the use, and they have very extensive powers to requisition private and public property for purposes. We need to get, and basically what I'm saying is that person, we don't have enough of those people, because we've had some retirements and some staff leave in key positions, and we need to get that.
What sort of a timeline to get them trained up?
So
I mean, we're talking about rural communities here.
yes. And so it will depend on the resourcing, and getting the group controller training. We have asked for that to happen in July. We are probably more likely to, McDem is running a course in September. So after that point, we'll be able to roll out the wider training program and look at those medium-term priorities, which include community.
So you said there's a few gaps. Have they been filled?
That's the purpose of this paper, is just to say, yes, we are bringing some of the positions back into council as well. So we are looking at us suggesting that you bring the positions into council, because council is quite a well-resourced organisation, and we have to promote that integration. Yeah, we have the ability to do that a little better. So, yeah. So now we have to train those people, basically, because there are changes to previous.
And they'll have more clarity when they're being trained.
Yes, they'll know what they can and can't do and when.
Right. Will they have sort of like a list of what they can do or can't at certain periods of recovery and events around the line?
Perhaps, since it is a McDem training, perhaps Andrew could talk to us about what's involved in that. Interested, your worship?
I just want to really know the outcomes, to make sure that they are well trained, they have clarity in their roles, that we're not liable as a council, and they effectively efficient. I'm just thinking, is the 20 grand enough?
Through the chair, we have contingency in place. So we have John Clark and James Beatty, who is our alternate controller, and they've both agreed during this time of transition, until we can get them, the new identified controllers, trained and signed off by McDem. We've got contingency in place so that the region isn't at risk until that time.
Are they going to be trained in Gisborne? Where are they going?
We are awaiting guidance from McDem on what their controller development course looks like, which should be confirmed by September, but likely to be trained in Wellington, and we will support getting them there.
Oh, so they haven't even got the course ready. That's interesting. Mr. Andrew.
There's been a previous controller course that was reviewed. The first cohort, first course right now, and for these course for controllers in recovery minutes, only do the controller training in each region for how controller works. It's actually a leadership role, and it's not just a civil management, it's policy, government, local government, anybody who is an EPI response, police response, fire response, all agency leadership course controllers in recovery minutes. To answer your question, that's the new course that starts the first cohort in now. I'm talking to William Baker this afternoon a bit more about running a controller we've got here. With controllers, you need to have that sort of benchmark controller 101 or before you get to the course. And that's going to be 2 or 3 of those courses this year.
Thank you. Councillor Seymour.
And supplementary to that, because that's the level of controller course, the workshops or whatever to be determined for community linked people, which I think is what Councillor Burdett was asking about. and revitalising. Some of our groups are great because they are called on really often and they're really clear and in place, but there are other areas that don't have a structure in place. So what are we doing about that, please?
Through your worship, perhaps what I could talk to his, when he talks about his activity report, can give an update on some of the work that he's been doing there.
That'll be good. Thank you.
Yeah, we've identified in the past before that, quite a few of our staff needed training, and I'm just wondering where we are at this stage. Those ones that were intended to have the training, have they done it?
Yep, again, through the manager's activity report, we can give an update on some of the training that has been run internally. So through your worship, if we have an adverse event at this stage, or even a declared state of emergency, we have, as Keita has pointed out, Mr. John Clark is still on as our group controller. So we do have support until we have adequate train up and hand over to our alternatives, as well as Mr. Beatty.
Because one ends up being out of the country or someone has a meeting they need to go to. So, we shouldn't rely, it's really great that Mr. Clark is still available to us, but we must move with some speed to get other people up to speed to cover our bases.
Yes, and absolutely, which is why we undertook the review and we have been training internally. So the whole process around bringing the management of civil defence emergency back in-house was to provide for that contingency and that support so that we can actually alternate out, because as we had historically, as we pointed out, people weren't available, but now we have sufficient, building that sufficient coverage and resilience.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. My apologies for being late. Listen, I just having attended a couple of meetings and the other night at the Federated Farmers. One of the, I guess, conversations that came through that space too was the need for those in this space getting out into those, because obviously with successional change, etc., we need to be assured that people do know who is the champion for the cause in the space of council, but also making sure our communities are aware of who is in this space, being prepared and also staying in touch. I guess that's one of the concerns, is often we set in motion the plan, who's doing it and who's there, and then it sits in that sense. So as you said, Yvette, we don't ever want to, not be ready. We're always on the ground ready to go, and that was some of the feedback from this space of those. And one of the concerns obviously with resourcing and managing was when we take things back in-house, how much, do we ensure the empowerment or the space of that conversation relationally as with those in those communities that feel when the roads are cutting them off, etc. Just, I guess there's certainty that people need to have. And the roadmen was mentioned, that notion of having those who are available to clear roads after storm, and all that. So I guess what I was hearing clearly was, what you're saying, that we are, and the recommendations are there, but how it looks and feels for those in the rural sector to get the certainty that we are all on, in this together, as we have been in light of other recent events. But those are just some of the speakings. Again, we go out to our engagement community spaces, but the constant was, don't just set it up and then we've got it in an envelope in this room, but it's a constant, I guess, in our region.
Yeah, I think it's also about, through your worship, is that civil defence is about a community response. It isn't just a thing that sits inside the four walls where people are being done things to. And part of that too is recognising, so with the community link structure and trying to build some resilience in that also we have a big township or city area that actually there's currently no mechanism in place to ensure that the bulk are ready and prepared. So that's also another part of our focus, is also, while we're looking at rural, we also need to be mind and balance that with township and make sure that we're covering the whole of community. So while a lot of the resources or the training is put inside, it is very much about the community and making sure that the community are mobilised and prepared when we need to, if we need to.
That notion of that local knowledge, you know, those who've lived in the generations that have lived in those rural sectors as well as other parts of our region, often do get to it. Obviously, they just know what to do, but how we enable that better, I guess, is moving forward and constant.
Councillor Burdett,
Question I was just going
thank you
to
very
ask
much.
the question about the northern area right at present. I know with retirements, are we fully covered? Should something happen, I mean.
So through
No,
the
don't
chair,
worry about
there's currently a plan in place and infrastructure. So the community link forum that you're aware of, we understand there are succession issues, but what we're using as well through Yvette's mahi is, while we're considering our strategic approach, how do we best support the community link? So it's a 30-year-old forum, as I understand it. How can we evolve it to be even more useful for our communities preparing for emergencies? At the moment, we're awaiting the, so we've had a research project completed that needs to be peer reviewed by GNS. So we're awaiting the outcomes of that review before we can plan with the wider tsunami project how we roll that out. So it is, as I understand it, it's currently with GNS and McDem have been involved in the peer review of that. Andrew, do you want to add anything further to that comment?
Funded project on behalf of the ministry, and so there's money being held by the ministry until that project is completed. Upon completion, we pay for that $60,000. So really our involvement is once the project's finished and signed off, that's when the funding will be released. So
I was at Wainui at the meeting last night, and Paul was talking about the remodelling that was going on at the moment. He was talking quite a short time frame before that was nearing completion, so that's a major component of it. So that remodeling's happening at the moment, isn't it? Yeah.
So Your Worship, how to read the work plan is, so it's a standard plan that's been put in front of all the committees, and it's just showing what reports you should be expecting to receive at which group meeting. So at this stage, they're just standard reports, so your standard quarterly activity reports, but no doubt when, if there are any amendments to the Emergency Management Act, we will be reporting up any implications of that to you.
Yeah, is that? So we're adopting something that will, some part of it will come. There's a few weeks, March to now.
sorry, research is always changing after events. And so, for example, following the Tohoku tsunami in Japan, it provided evidence that tsunamis do not just create a point source. They used to think it came from a centre force and then sort of concentrically moved out. That was actually the whole slip line faulted over many kilometres and the whole thing moved. So that created more of exacerbated. So when they learned from all these events, and so that's why the actual science is changing, which means we need to review what we are actually doing.
FWW trench, all these gadgets monitoring slippage, slow slippage. Okay, 2448. My voice is not obviously loud enough. Right, page 2448, 19-115, Emergency Management Quarterly Activity Report. And we've read everything, right? It's very comprehensive. Mr. Tamati Smith, he's been doing a very good job. I see he's reinvigorated some scenarios. Some he's cancelled and he started up again. I see in my diary. And so, Mr. Tamati.
Kia ora, matua. Tēnā tātou te toma. Now we've all got the quarterly report in front of us. Is there any questions that council wanted to bring up in particular?
Yes, Councillor.
I just note that you did a presentation at Waikirikiri School. I was just wondering if there were any other kura that you were going to do that presentation to, and is that something that we're going to broaden the context of presentation into, schools-wise?
Yeah, good question. The part of our community engagement program is to be reactive to whatever schools, whatever community groups, or even businesses that want some advice in regards to that. Our training assistant, our training advisor, Paul Stewart, is always available to conduct those things. On average, probably one every 2 to 3 weeks, maybe even more, a school or a business group or a community group will ring our office up and we'll go over and do a presentation. From memory, the majority of the education packages that we're delivering are around the tsunami situation, which ties in easily with earthquakes and scenarios and things like that. But yeah, we're always open to it, and we'd like to be probably a little bit more proactive and canvass many areas in regards to schools and things like that, but it's just too big for us at this stage. So at this stage, we're purely reactive to community groups. Yep.
Yes, on that, I think there is a need to be proactive, and I think the proactivity would be along the lines of identifying the schools with the highest risk. When I think about the schools in Gisborne, Awapuni School, I mean, they really would have to have good exit plans for that school because of its location and what could happen to it, as opposed to something like Lytton, which would be way back on the list, you know. So I think if there was an opportunity to be proactive in the schools, I would identify the highest risk ones and actually engage with them right up front and get onto it. Yeah.
Totally agree. In fact, we have had good contact with Awapuni School in the last 2 weeks that I'm aware of, and Paul has given advice on the zones. In fact, I think one of the action plans that Awapuni School had in play, we advised them that they probably needed to change it, just amend it slightly. I won't get into the details. And they were quite appreciative of that. So Awapuni School is certainly on our radar. Most of the schools are. It's just a matter of finding the time to get it all done.
Most of the schools have participated in the drop, cover and hold and the evacuation exercise going back some time, haven't they? That national day that's held in October. I know I've participated with Tolaga Bay Wawa. So they do, I think they do have roles, but just the extra guidance would be really helpful, like you suggested.
Yeah, absolutely. We remain committed to the shakeout this October as well. It's part of our training plan that Paul will execute this year, absolutely.
And just can I comment further to that? Okay, it's good to have plans for individual organisations, but there is a real challenge, and you would hope that an overall plan has worked out that the people that are on the south side of the rivers have got choke points in the way of those bridges. And if I can just imagine everyone trying to get out at one time. So what coordination of evacuation from those areas is going to happen? Has that been taken into account?
Yeah, that's a good question. So in relation to the choke points, we have identified them. In relation to your comment about us providing plans, we don't provide a plan per se. We rely on those institutions to come up with a plan, and then typically they'd invite us in to look at their plan, and then we would make recommendations on how to avoid those choke points, where to coordinate an evacuation point and things like that. And another thing in regards to the schools in particular is identifying a plan per whānau on how they were going to rendezvous with their children.
But you know, mummies and daddies, they're very caring. Yeah, but I can tell you they're very vigilant, these mummies and daddies. Councillor Stoltz.
Well, I'm a mommy, and that's exactly the question I want to ask of Mr. Tamati now. I know that schools, because I was actively involved at St Mary's, where we have our evacuation, our earthquake drill, even now lockdown drills. So I do know the school have an active plan, but they never really communicate with the parents. And this is exactly touching on what you said earlier. What do you do when there is an event? Because if you're on this side of the river and the school is on that side, how do you communicate? And I do think that's a message we need to send to parents. What do you do in an event when your kids are at school? Because I'm not sure the schools communicate that well with the parents. And it will have a massive influence. If all our kids are at school in the morning and something big happened, I will want to go over to Campion to grab my two boys, and is that the best thing to do at that stage?
Not only you, Mother.
I know, 20,000 other parents feel exactly like I do.
Those bridges.
Yeah.
People trying to go in different directions.
Yeah, but Mr. Tamati's got them under control. He has.
So through the chair, as a result of the review, a comprehensive training plan for the organisation where the CDM office is merely the facilitator to support the development of these plans is currently underway. So a systematic approach through all the communities, all our most vulnerable parts of the community and how we support them to respond during an emergency is being developed. Obviously that needs to tie in with the work Ed is doing around what's our wider strategy. How do should we target training our most vulnerable members of the community first, the ones close to the floods, because it's a wide brief with a limited resource, so we need to be strategic. And then we're hoping to come back to you around these are our critical wider issues and may likely need some further resourcing to support the implementation of that. So that work is currently underway.
Thanks, Katie, for that, because I guess that's what we're wanting to hear. Obviously, we've got a strategic plan in front of us, and we need all those in these spaces to have input and come to the table. Do we have the information about how ready we would be now? Because I guess in a strategic plan, would it be that we should practice a city-wide better tsunami alert in the sense of giving people heads up, we want to be prepared and ready, so we see how people, I mean, obviously, when a real event happens, as that earthquake, we saw choke points and, things we learned from it. But I'm just really, aware that, like Riet has, Councillor Stoltz has said, we as parents don't often hear enough about, we don't want to be a hindrance to an active plan that's going to work if we show up. But do we have information about how ready schools or businesses or those other places are now, and if we're working together collaboratively, how that would look in moving forward?
So the results of Marianne's review that she presented to you highlighted what we know about our current state and where we'd like to go. So you have been given that information, and we hope to keep coming back to you to a more aware group so that we can feed this into you. And I guess some of the findings as well from that review sort of highlighted the approach to civil defence, and people weren't quite sure around what we should do, what we shouldn't do. So we're hoping with a more educated group, educated community, and some of these things in training being rolled out, that scenario, based on the learnings from the Queen's Birthday floods, that it's not like that anymore. So there's vulnerabilities everywhere. We're sort of trying to figure out how we plug them together.
Councillor Seymour.
Thank you very much, Your Worship. I'm just looking at the general update on page 24. 34 and 35, I'm looking at the general update, and I don't see the word community link mentioned at all. So can someone please tell me what's going to be done for those groups? Because we know there's some really good ones out there that are still functioning, and we know there's some areas where there are none, which is what Councillor Burdett raised previously.
So, Your Worship, if you refer to page 28, progress on plans, it provides you with an update of what we're doing around community linked volunteers. It also gives you an update on the training that's occurred within the organisation in terms of the numbers. So 38 council officers that have been through some form of emergency management training.
The
Which
eighth
box, please? You go
Eighth
down.
box. The eighth box. They're not a number, but I counted them.
Great, so why isn't it important enough to appear on the schedule where everything else is, on 34 and 35?
Your Worship, you're on, Councillor Seymour's on the next page.
You're on the next
look,
paper.
Ahead of the pack.
You're way ahead of yourself, councillor. Very good.
If I may make a comment in terms of the plans and preparedness. We currently have a number of plans, and those plans set out our procedures, our standard operating procedures for if there is an emergency. So it's not like we're kind of finding our way through things. So we have a whole range of flood plans, adverse event plans. You have your group plan that you've approved, our response plan, a pandemic plan, your plans. So what we need to do though is review some of those plans to make sure the contexts are correct, to make sure that the procedures are correct, and once the information from the tsunami mapping comes back, we'll update those. So I just want to give you assurance that we do have plans. And second thing I want to point out is that actually since Wiremu has come on board, I have confidence as the KIG chair that the steps that we are putting in place should give you assurance that we are training people, we have enough contingency there, we have enough expertise that should anything happen in the meantime, if it doesn't, that we can cope. And I would like to also point out we've got our police training that I haven't actually been a part of. We haven't had one since I've been CE. For civil defence emergency response tomorrow, which has been initiated by the team, and there has been a number of changes in the team. There's been illnesses and there's been deaths that have, and changes at a staff level that have impacted, and that team has managed to continue to chip away at the work program, and I think we're doing a brilliant job.
Yes, fantastic. So
In supplementary, now that I'm on the right page, can you give us a time frame? Because both of the boxes that relate to community links say off track.
Yeah, any time frames there? Years 1 to 3. There you go. It'll
Could
take
have
up to 3
events
years.
in that time.
Yeah, if I can just add to that, councillor. My operational plan actually addresses what you just said there. The problem is that the plan will only satisfy that question probably in the next 12 to 24 months.
Thank you. At least you're being honest. Thank
Yeah.
you.
So, Madam Chief, can you, when these off-track ones, if you can report them in your CE's report to us to see how they're tracking or not tracking, or when they're completed?
Absolutely.
Is that all right, Madam C?
So
You got some off
you do
track.
get an update, Your Worship, through the CE activity report. You get an update on the activities across the organisation. If the standard item that you would like to see, happy to accommodate, bearing in mind, however, that this will then just expand and duplicate what we're currently producing to the group as
Yeah,
with your civil defence responsibilities
But
on.
not all the council here. Only some of the councils here. Yeah.
I think it is
It's just
important.
cut and paste, isn't it?
It's not,
No?
it's the duplication, Your Worship, of the report that you're currently getting. So you're getting this as part of your civil defence group hat.
But we only get that twice a year. Four
Oh.
times a year. Well, we don't get it that often because, I mean, I happen to know that there was one area that did not have a community link group functioning. I'm not going to name them, but they don't. And they managed as individuals, and Meredith heard about it the other night, as individuals do in the community. And that's why I'm asking to get the community link teams up and running again. I mean, we do have them in some places. Oh, it's great. But there was one in the area that has nobody responsible.
Any response? Okay, all in favour? Yeah, I've got to move in second, haven't I, Colin? Do I? Moved by councillor Burdette, seconded by councillor Akuhata Brown. Any further questions? If not, all in favour? Aye. Contrary, carried. Page 3248. Management report on this Hikurangi thing is at the forefront of the news. So what can happen? Yes, I know, but it could affect us here. Oh, that's what I'm asking.
To the full-day presentation that the staff councillors were invited to attend, Your Worship.
When's that?
That had already been.
Oh. Did
And
anyone
the
turn up?
invitation was extended to all of council.
Yeah,
Did you go?
yeah, well, Paul covered that pretty well last night at Wainui, and it was very well attended. There was
Yeah.
a lot of people there, so there's a lot of interest in that, and
Good.
he went through it pretty well. And it's indicate, I mean, there's a lot of concern there at the moment about the explorations around Hikurangi. But the reason they're doing that there is solely on the shallowness of the ability to do that research rather than there's an imminent problem going on there. So, I mean, I think that's what attracted such a big crowd to Wainui. There is a fear that they're out there doing this stuff because there's something going to happen.
Yes.
So it kind of relaxed us a bit, but I mean, it's an unknown, it's absolute unknown. But some of the heights of tsunami and things like that were a concern to Wainui. The indications were that it's an individual thing where you've got to work out your own exit plans. You've got to have your own strategies, and that we can have these coordinators and all that, but they can't come to each person and educate each person. So probably need to have more things like happened at Wainui last night, because people went out there well educated on what they need to do now, and that's why they went to the meeting in the first place, So I think that whole strategy of getting the education, getting people to know their exit plans, getting to know that we shouldn't all jump in our cars and go to these choke points and all that. So, yeah, I think more of what happened last night would be quite good.
The interesting thing that, like, you hear Hikurangi and you think it's by the Maunga or around that area.
Yeah, that's right.
But it actually goes right down to Christchurch or something, eh? Yeah. The bottom plate's going over into the Australasian plate and causing a bit of slippage, but slipping slowly in places they identified something in Napier.
The thing about that, about everyone having the knowledge about what could happen, because, I mean, at this stage, there's a likelihood if you started talking about tsunami, a lot of Kaiti would get in their cars and try to get out of there, but they're protected, but they could cause the problems by evacuating when they don't need to be. So it's about getting that individual knowledge right throughout the whole community so that everyone knows what the plan is and what their, not the plan, but their individual plan.
Any further questions? Oh, it's just, it's not quite 2:30 yet. I'll move. Second, note the report. All in favour? All right, thank you very much to the author, Wiremu. Another paper prepared by Wiremu is page 47 to 48. And it says, Andrew Hickey will be in attendance. Welcome, Andrew, you're in attendance. The discussions or matters in the report are low significance. So obviously you come for that. Hey. So is there a slideshow for this, is it? No, Carl. Hey, no. So note the contents of this report, which is nothing really. Oh, yeah, sure. That's it, please. Welcome, Andrew Hickey.
Good, everybody. Just a quick update on behalf of the director. Sorry.
The boss is coming.
Oh, sorry.
Streaming to Wellington.
That's not good. Just a quick update on behalf of the Director of Civil Defence, Sarah Stewart Black. She puts out a monthly update to the coordinating executive group chairs. There's a few things there which I just wanted to bring to your attention. We've been rather busy lately with regards to events, which is, of course, challenges for us. Christchurch, 15th of March, the West Coast flooding and the Nelson Tasman fires. So it's kept us rather busy. But for your attention in particular, and I've previously spoken to you about, they undertook a review called the Technical Advisory Group, which was how to improve better responses for New Zealand. Out of that is the emergency management system reform, which is going to make some changes which will affect all of us, and one of them being potential changes to legislation. So just a heads up for yourselves, and that there will be some changes in legislation for the Civil Defence Emergency Management Act. That's going to be later on this year at the earliest, and it will come out. There'll be some consultation and discussions here in Tairāwhiti. Really heads up on that one. The National Disaster Resilience Strategy, I've previously spoken to yourselves about it, was actually Cabinet signed off on it on the 10th of April. That's our document which underpins how we as New Zealanders respond. So it's actually it's not just, it used to be called the Civil Defence Emergency Management Strategy, and I think I mentioned to you last time, we potentially changed it to National Disaster Resilience Strategy, aligning with the Sendai framework, and this is for all New Zealanders. And in here, there's guidance for individuals. So sort of you're talking about earlier on about how family, whānau, and schools. There's things here for communities, businesses, organisations, government, central and local government. So that is actually, as per the Civil Defence Emergency Act, that's our document to underpin our direction for where we're going for the next 10 years for our resilience strategy. And so it's not just Civil Defence Emergency Management, it's everybody, it's all government, local, central, and individuals, family, whānau.
This is quite a significant paradigm shift from previous to now, isn't it?
It is quite a change from the point of view of its the change in making sure that it's not as soon as this thing is outside this magical Civil Defence Emergency Management to try and say it's everybody. And in there is actually some pages, sorry, I'll show you very quickly. Is the actual three main areas, which are the actual managing the risks, effective response, and enabling empowering our communities. And under that, there are some outputs which we'll be reporting on and achieving in the next 10 years. And so that putting it to yourselves, I just thought I'd also mention to you that last time I came and talked to you, there were some questions about these fly-in teams, and it sort of aligns what you're talking about earlier on in response. So the fly-in teams are in not just local authorities, it's all of government. So there's some St. John, there's some, I believe, some foreign emergency, there's local authority and central government. These teams are now actually have been selected for the first panel to go into training. And what that is that is the team to come in and work with the local response and the civil defence management emergency. It's not just that these people could assist in a biosecurity or a pandemic. It's any hazard. But from the point of view of what hats you're wearing today, it is to assist in a civil defence management if you need it. It's they'll come in and work with you, and they're currently called, as per the report, fly-in teams. That just means they can come in and work with you. I know we talked about last time, Kaikoura, the roads were closed, people come in by helicopter, that sort of thing. People will get in if needed, and how we support the team to respond here. And the only one I really talked about is, very briefly, is you've talked about it, covered it this morning, about the Structure Coordinated Incident Management System, CIMS, known as SIMS. That's the structure we use for how we respond. It's not just civil defence, that's police, fire, and all responding agencies. That's being reviewed, and so that might have some changes for how you actually require to do your training and what's required in response as well. So that was all quickly from us, if that's all right.
Thank you, Andrew.
Any questions? I'm happy to attempt to answer.
The flying teams.
Is there any update on the national warning device, like with the cellular phone trials and everything? I mean, has that been progressed, and is that the only successful method of a warning system?
A very good question. So referring to there is the emergency mobile alert, which we will have all received the test of, I was tracking my days, everyone was here. It's only one tool, and that's just something I really want to emphasise. It's only one means of getting the message out to the community. And if you're not aware, I think I might have mentioned to you last time, it's pinged off the actual cell phone tower. So you can actually isolate whatever community who receives their cell phones within range of that tower. The last test, I'm hoping you all received it, it got over 60% of the New Zealand public. It was 30% the first test, and so it will continually get better. It'll get better as our phones improve, it'll get better as it gets tweaked, and also the infrastructure that cell phone providers, as they upgrade or improve their cell phones, it'll increase as well. So that's quite successful for that short period of time to get to that height. And also, that's the people who directly received it. We're also adding in there that you would tell your family, you would tell your neighbour, which actually increases the range. But just to emphasise, and to emphasise, that's only one tool. We still have to use if you've got a text alert, or if you've actually got knocking on your neighbour's door, the radio, the television, all those are still other tools. But we're quite happy that compared to the rest of the world, that's quite a successful second test. And there will be another test coming up, so I'm sorry to say you'll receive it again. But one thing to be aware of is that the challenge we face is that these people who buy phones that have been parallel imported, they're set up for other countries. That's why we get some anomalies. And until we can help with those things out, there will still be some glitches.
And how's those, the Huawei phones work all right?
The Nelson Tasman Fire?
The Huawei phones.
Oh, it depends. If they're bought through our providers, these Spark, Vodafone, 2 Degrees, etc., they're set up a certain way. But if you bought them parallel imports, which it could be
Russian. Yeah.
Without mentioning other companies, but there are other ones who aren't actually a cell phone provider. That's where you're not guaranteed what the setup is in the back of that phone.
It's actually interesting that they said the Huawei phone was a Māori phone. Heard that the other day.
Thank you, Andrew. Just after obviously any incidences, you review and look at how well we responded to the needs, etc. Are we seeing New Zealanders, because I mean we often get noted as being quite apathetic about the space. We tend to react when things happen, but the response leading up to and getting prepared for, are we better prepared? We've got a changing kind of atmosphere of housing, like Airbnbs and and the like of changing living accommodation spaces too. So do you sense that New Zealanders, I know when I was at school every now and again would do the big, going to have a bit of a fire emergency thing, but not, I still think there's a lot more that could be done to get us in a prepared, because now it's not about when, it's about, not about if, but when. And we live in a very much an unstable framework of it, we're on a fault line kind of space. So is New Zealand, in your work that you guys are doing nationally, do you feel we're getting better at this? Are we still needing work in this space, and is it a constant? Because I feel like sometimes we get really good at something and then we drop the ball, I suppose.
And a very good point, and complacency is our biggest challenge, isn't it? The recent events, we've had quite a few of them, and the director made a comment the other day that in the time that Sarah Stewart-Black has been director, a few years, 41 emergencies we've had throughout New Zealand, so they're becoming more frequent as well. To answer your question, we are getting better at showing that, but that does not mean we cannot stop to reflect, and it also means we do always have to keep going. And you asked a question before about public readiness. We do a Colma Brunton each year survey to see how prepared our communities are. There's a general trend, but we still have that apathy, as you mentioned. So we've always got to keep continuing improving. But in general, seems to be, I've got to say touch wood when I say that, I think. But yes, good question.
How do we compare with the rest of the country in preparedness and training and all that? Mr. Andrew?
You've got, every sort of defence management group has their challenges, and I think one of your biggest challenges is being a unitary authority. It's good and bad, but being a unitary authority, you don't have the, dare I say it in this case, a luxury of calling other councils to support you. So it's got to be all in-house, it's got to be your own team, and it can be good and bad. With regards to your, I think one of your challenges is your ability to resource, because you're relying solely on yourselves as the District Council. To compare, we try not to compare in that we haven't taken monitoring evaluation. Last time we did here was 2015, and you did quite well. But again, the complacency we've always got to actually continue. And if you get change of staff and change of personnel at a high level, that can be a challenge for you with regards to controllers, recovery managers, welcome managers, and those sort of things.
Okay.
Just one other thing to note, that's why in communities like ours, where we do have some whānau struggling, the likelihood of saving food for 2 to 3 days, having that kind of food available, for some whānau, that's a stretch to ask when they live day to day. So I guess it's a real highlight on those in the disparity space, you know, how prepared batteries for torches, those types of things becomes quite an issue. So it is, you know, it's something to consider. Not all whānau will be, I guess, have that readiness based on just living day to day. So.
And that's very true. And it's one of the things also, because it's a national public education program, which links in with your public education program here regionally and locally, and how we work together to make sure we continue those messaging. And yes, we know some people struggle to actually, you know, 3 days food and water is a struggle, best of times, let alone during an emergency. Again, we've just got to be aware of how we cognizant of that, and what we do in the emergency to recognise and help that.
Yes, well, I think my son's eating this weekend.
I move, seconded by Councillor Stoltz. All in favour? Aye. Contrary carried. Resolution to go into public excluded. Just for the minutes, I move, seconded by Councillor Stoltz. All in favour? Aye. Contrary, page 2 of 5. The minutes there for you. You've read them. Someone like to move and second them? Moved by Councillor Wilson, seconded by Councillor Seymour. All in favour? Aye. Contrary carried. Any matters arising from those minutes? If not, yes. Sure. Yes. That's been noted. I saw her writing things down. All in favour? Aye. Contrary carried. Are there any matters of general business or anything like that? I think it's good manners to stay to 2:30 to acknowledge Mr. Bob Pop Milner, all the way from Tolaga Bay, who lives in that street, Argyle Street now. Yep. Yeah. Okay, what else is happening? I don't know. Is anything else? Close the meeting? Yeah, okay. Right, thank you.